She thought her mom abandoned her, until a patient in a nursing home called her by her birth name, one she'd never told anyone. Welcome back, and thank you for listening. I'm just a small storyteller, so if this touched you, please hit that subscribe button for more heartwarming stories like this. Let me know in the comments where and what time you're listening from. I read them all. Now let's hear the story. Ammani Brooks had always known how to disappear in plain sight. She wasn't invisible exactly, but she'd mastered the art of soft smiles, quick steps, and never giving too much away. At 23, she had no family, no photos on her dresser, no tales of childhood memories she could call her own. Just a tiny apartment over a corner laundromat in Tulsa, a stack of nursing textbooks she never finished reading, and a job that kept her heart just busy enough to stop it from aching. Golden Pines Nursing Center was quiet, clean, a little understaffed, but the residents were kind, and most of the time, she liked the rhythm of it. She worked the second shift from 2 to 10 p.m., the in-between hours when the sun started sinking and some of the older patients grew restless. Sundowning, they called it. Confusion at dusk. She understood it. Something about that hour made everything you'd buried start to creep back in. Ammani was good at her job. Never late. Always gentle. She didn't chat much with the other nurses, but the residents adored her. The quiet girl with the warm hands, they called her. She'd sit with the ones who didn't have visitors, brush their hair, read them scripture in soft, even tones. But no one knew much about her, and that was how she liked it. Then came the Thursday that changed everything. It started like any other day, pushing the med cart down the West Hall, nodding to Mr. Lyle in 3C, refilling ice water pitchers, scribbling quick updates and patient logs. Around 4 p.m., the head nurse, Miss Tanya, flagged her down at the station. New patient came in today. Holloway. Room 6B. Little combative, real fragile. Try not to spook her. You're good with the tough ones. Ammani just nodded. Room 6B was at the far end, next to the window that overlooked the back garden. The lights were dim when she entered. A woman sat hunched in the bed, thin and pale, with a scarf loosely tied over thinning gray hair. She didn't look up. Ms. Holloway, Ammani said gently. My name's Ammani. I'm here to bring your medication. The woman didn't answer. Ammani moved closer, setting the small paper cup on the tray beside the bed. She was about to turn away when the woman's head jerked up. Her eyes locked on Ammani's chest. Then she gasped. Where did you get that necklace? Ammani blinked. I'm sorry. That necklace. The woman snapped, her voice trembling. That's not yours. That's my daughter's. Where is she? What did you do to my baby? Ammani instinctively took a step back. The air in the room shifted, suddenly heavy, electric. She reached up, almost without thinking, and touched the silver chain around her neck. It was the only thing she'd ever had that felt like hers. A delicate heart-shaped locket with a name etched so faintly on the back, it was almost invisible. Amara. No one had ever asked about it before. She didn't even remember where she first got it. Some caseworker had found it with her things, said it was probably junk, but she kept it, wore it, like a placeholder for something she couldn't name. The woman in the bed was crying now. Amara, she whispered. My baby's name was Amara. I gave her that necklace. I carved the name myself. I remember the night. June 15th. I never even got to hold her. They told me she died. But I knew. I knew they were lying. Ammani felt her knees lock. Ma'am, she said, her voice barely steady. I think you're confused. Please lie back down. I'm not confused, the woman screamed. That's my daughter's necklace. Where's she? What did you do to her? Ammani hit the call button. 2 nurses came in moments later and gently coaxed the woman back into bed. She didn't fight. She just wept. Ammani walked out in silence. Her hands were shaking. She clocked out an hour early that day and didn't say why. That night, she went home and took the necklace off, set it on the table, stared at it like it might catch fire. She told herself it was a coincidence. Delirium, dementia, confusion. She'd seen it before. Patients believing a nurse was their daughter, their wife, their sister. Memories tangling and unraveling. It was sad but common. Still, she couldn't sleep. The next day, she avoided 6B. But on Monday, when she finally stepped inside again with a cup of applesauce and a routine vitals check, The woman stirred as soon as she entered. "It's you," she whispered. Ammani didn't speak. Darlene Holloway sat up slowly, her eyes softer now, but just as haunted. "Do you have a birthmark?" she asked. Ammani blinked. "What? A birthmark? On your hand. Right here." The woman reached out, trembling, and pointed to the base of her own right thumb. Ammani's blood turned cold. Because yes, she did. A curved, pale crescent of skin just beneath the joint on her right hand. Small but oddly shaped. Every foster parent called a quirk. A lucky scar. A fingerprint from God. But no one, not a single person, had ever known it was there. Ammani backed out of the room without a word. She didn't sleep that night either. Instead, she lay on the couch, necklace clutched in one hand, birthmark burning like a secret in the other. For the first time in her life, she began to wonder if Ammani Brooks was ever her name at all. Ammani didn't return to room 6B for 3 days. She switched shifts with another nurse, claimed she was feeling under the weather. Truth was, she couldn't stomach walking past that door. Not with Darlene Holloway's voice still echoing in her head like a ghost that knew her name. Amara. That name hadn't meant anything to her. Not really. It was just a faint engraving on the back of a locket she wore out of habit. A name she sometimes whispered when the world got too quiet. A name she used like a prayer, without ever knowing what she was praying for. She told herself it was a coincidence. A mistake. Delirium. She'd seen dementia patients mistake staff for long-lost relatives before. It was sad but common. It didn't mean anything. But the birthmark? That was harder to ignore. She kept staring at it now, this tiny crescent on the base of her right thumb. No one had ever mentioned it before. No one had ever known it was there. Except Darlene. Ammani wanted to believe she was imagining things. But something about the woman's eyes, they weren't confused. They weren't fading. They were locked in, anchored in a pain that wasn't make-believe. On the 4th day, Miss Tanya pulled her aside in the break room. "You avoiding Holloway?" she asked, not unkindly. Ammani swallowed. "No, just been busy. She won't eat. Barely speaks. Keeps asking for the girl with the necklace. I think you should go see her." Ammani hesitated. She said something strange, "Tanya." The head nurse raised an eyebrow. "They all do eventually." "No," Ammani said quietly. She said, "I was her daughter. She recognized my necklace. And a birthmark I have. She knew exactly where it was." Tanya's smile faded. "She's got early-stage dementia, baby. That kind of specificity ain't always proof. But I get it. It's spooky. If it's too much, I can assign someone else." Ammani shook her head slowly. "No, I'll go." She walked to room 6B like her shoes were made of stone. The door creaked open. Darlene was sitting upright this time, staring out the window, thin fingers curled around the bed rail. She didn't look up until Ammani stepped inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Darlene turned her head slowly. Her eyes were hollow, but not empty. "I was 19 when I had you," she said softly. "I wasn't supposed to. I was sick. My kidneys were failing, even back then. They said the pregnancy would kill me." Ammani stood frozen near the sink, her heart hammering against her ribs. "They told me you didn't make it," Darlene continued. "That you stopped breathing. But I saw you. For 2 seconds. They let me touch your hand before they took you away." Her fingers moved, trembling. "That's how I saw the mark. On your right hand. I kissed it before they pulled you out of the room." Ammani swallowed the lump in her throat. "I gave a nurse a necklace. Said if you lived, if they were lying, to give it to you. It was all I had. I carved the name myself. Amara. I didn't even know what it meant. I just wanted you to have something for me." Ammani stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "You remember all that?" she asked. "I remember every second," Darlene whispered, "because they were the only seconds I ever had with you." Silence fell between them like dust. Ammani sat down in the chair by the bed. Her hands were in her lap, fingers tangled tight. "My file says I was found outside a hospital," she said. "No ID, no birth record. They call me Ammani because it was written on the clipboard of the nurse who brought me in. That name, it wasn't mine." Darlene's chin trembled. "Then you are mine. I don't know what I am," Ammani said, her voice shaking. "I've been Ammani for 23 years. Darlene reached out with shaking fingers and gently placed her hand over Ammani's. "I don't need you to believe me today. I just need you to know, I never left you. They told me you died. And when I tried to ask questions later, they said I was confused. That I imagined you. She let out a bitter laugh. Funny how the world gaslights women who lose babies. Especially black women. Especially the sick ones. Ammani felt something twist in her chest. I need time, she said quietly. I'll wait, Darlene replied, just as quiet. I've waited 23 years. That night, Ammani walked home through falling rain. She didn't take the bus. She didn't call a ride. She just walked past shuttered stores, wet sidewalks, flickering streetlights, clutching the locket in her palm like it might answer the questions screaming in her head. When she got home, she opened the drawer where she kept old paperwork, school files, medical slips, every foster placement form she could find. But there was nothing. No birth record. No hospital file. Just a chain of transfers, like a package nobody wanted to sign for. She held the locket up to the light. Amara, she whispered. It didn't feel like a stranger's name anymore. It felt like a secret she was finally ready to hear. Ammani didn't go to work the next day. She called in, said she needed a personal day. Miss Tanya didn't ask questions, just told her to rest. But Ammani didn't rest. Couldn't. She spent the morning on her couch, the locket in her hand, her birthmark burning beneath her skin like it suddenly meant something ancient. Something sacred. She reread every paper in her drawer. Googled the name Amara Holloway over and over. Nothing came up. Nothing that could explain how a stranger knew the shape of her hand, the name on her neck, the ache in her chest. By afternoon, the rain started again. She hadn't eaten, hadn't changed, just sat in silence long enough that the apartment began to feel haunted. She needed air, a drive, something to make the noise in her head quiet down. She grabbed her keys, didn't bring a jacket, didn't know where she was going. The roads were slick with drizzle, the kind of slow rain that smeared streetlights into long, dying streaks of gold. The traffic lights flashed yellow, red, yellow, and she barely saw them. She kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on her chest, over the locket, and for a second, just a second, she let herself whisper it again. Amara. That's when it hit. A blur of white. A truck. Tires screeching. Horn blaring. Then, impact. Metal crumpling. Her body jerked sideways, her skull snapping against the driver's side window before the airbag exploded into her chest. Something sharp tore through her side. Her head lolled. Then nothing. She woke in pieces. Sound first. Beeping monitors. Murmurs. A woman's voice asking, "Can you hear me?" Then pain. A deep, raw ache blooming from her ribs to her legs. Her mouth tasted like iron. She tried to open her eyes. Couldn't. She's AB negative, a voice said, somewhere above her. We've contacted every bank in the tri-state. Nothing. She's crashing. If we don't get blood in the next 2 hours. The voice faded. Everything faded. Golden Pines was unusually quiet that evening. Most of the staff had already clocked out. Rain tapped against the windows. Darlene Holloway was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, her body too weak to move, but her mind sharp. Focused. Then she felt it. A twist in her chest. Not pain. Not fear. Something wrong. The aide assigned to her had just entered when the phone rang at the nurse's station. Yes, this is she. Wait, who? The aide's face dropped. Darlene sat up. Who is it? She croaked. The aide turned. It's St. Mark's. A nurse named Ammani Brooks was brought in after a car accident. Darlene swung her legs off the bed. Is she alive? They said she's in critical condition. They're searching for a blood donor. She's AB negative. Darlene was already reaching for her walker. The aide panicked. Ma'am, you can't leave the facility without authorization. I'm AB negative, Darlene snapped. She's my child. Ms. Holloway, with your kidneys. I said she's my child. She arrived at St. Mark's 30 minutes later, soaked in rain, escorted by the same aide who finally gave up trying to stop her. The nurse at the ER desk blinked when she saw her. I'm the mother, Darlene said. Her voice was steady now. I'm here to give her my blood. The nurse looked hesitant. Ma'am, you're listed as a patient at Golden Pines. You're in stage 4 renal. Test me. I'm a match. Do it now. The blood test came back 15 minutes later. Perfect match. They wheeled Darlene into a curtained trauma bay beside her unconscious daughter. She watched the machines ticking, watched the color drain from Amara's face. The staff tried one more time to talk her out of it. "You might not survive this," the doctor warned. Darlene nodded. "Then I'll go knowing I gave her something. Something no one ever let me give." The nurse inserted the line. Darlene's blood began to flow. Halfway through, her hand started to tremble. Her lips turned pale. She didn't stop, didn't flinch. She just stared at the girl in the hospital bed and whispered a single word. "Amara." Ammani stabilized within the hour. Her blood pressure crept back up. Her pulse steadied. But across the curtain, Darlene's body slumped forward. She was unconscious before the last drip of blood left the line. The crash team rushed in. Code blue. Chest compressions. Oxygen. They brought her back, barely. She never opened her eyes. They moved her to ICU. Sedated. Unresponsive. Official status, coma. When Amara woke the next morning, the nurse beside her smiled. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You had a donor. Just in time." Amara blinked, confused. Her voice cracked. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "A woman who says she's your mother." That's when she noticed the second bed in the room. The stillness. The breathing tube. The monitor's slow, steady pulse. Amara's voice broke in her throat. She turned to the nurse. "Did she survive?" "She's hanging on," the nurse said. "But barely." Amara didn't say anything. She just reached for the necklace at her throat, held it between her fingers like a thread to a life that had nearly unraveled. And then she whispered, without hesitation, without fear, "Mom." The beeping of the monitors was steady. Too steady. Amara sat propped up in a hospital bed across the room, her wrists still bound in gauze, bruises darkening along her ribs. A saline drip hummed beside her. Her body had survived, but her mind hadn't caught up. Not with the room they'd placed her in. Not with the woman lying unconscious just a few feet away, her chest rising and falling with the slow breath of machines. No one questioned it when Amara insisted she stay with her. The nurses tried once, gently, to suggest she be moved to a quieter room. She didn't even answer. She just grabbed her four-pole, wheeled it to the other side of the room, and sat beside Darlene's bed like she'd been there all her life. She didn't say much at first. She just watched. Watched the woman who'd called her daughter when no one else in the world ever had. Watched the rise and fall of her chest. Watched the quiet, careful stillness of a body that had given everything it had to keep her alive. She held Darlene's hand sometimes. Not tightly, just enough to let her know she was there. The skin felt paper-thin, almost translucent, but warm. That first morning, a nurse came in with a clipboard. "We'd like to order a DNA test," she said, "just to confirm. For the hospital records. Legal stuff." Amara didn't hesitate. "Do it. You're sure?" "I'm sure." The nurse gave her a look, curious, maybe even sympathetic, but left her alone after that. Time stretched. The second day, Amara didn't move from the chair. The nurses brought her meals. She barely touched them. She kept the locket on, the chain tucked into her gown, the pendant resting against her chest like an anchor. She opened it once, ran her thumb over the engraving again and again like the truth was hiding deeper inside it. On the third day, Miss Tanya showed up. She brought a duffel bag with fresh clothes, some toiletries, a small paper bag of snacks Amara wouldn't eat. She didn't say anything at first, just sat on the edge of the windowsill and looked at the woman in the bed. "I remember when she first came in," Tanya said quietly. "Didn't trust nobody. Hated the fluorescent lights. Said they made her skin feel like it was buzzing. But she talked about you." Even then, Amara didn't look up. She said she lost a baby. Said her baby had a mark on her hand and a necklace that nobody believed was real. She said if God had any grace left, he'd send her child back to her before the end. Amara closed her eyes. "She said you would come." "You did." Tanya reached over, placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. "You still got time." When Tanya left, Amara curled up in the chair beside her mother and just breathed. The machines kept their rhythm. So did the grief. By day 4, she was talking more. Soft things, low and quiet, like secrets you don't want to startle. "You know, I used to dream about you," she whispered once. "Didn't know it was you, but I saw your face in shadows. Heard someone humming something I didn't recognize." She shifted in the chair. Her voice cracked. I think it was you. I think I remembered before I knew. Sometimes she read scripture to Darlene, the same way she used to do for patients back at Golden Pines. Only now, her voice shook too much. Sometimes she had to stop. Other times, she hummed. It wasn't good. It didn't even stay on key. But she did anyway. His eye is on the sparrow. The first time she tried, she couldn't get past the second line. Her throat closed. Her ribs hurt. Her chest caved in like it was collapsing under something heavier than the air. She tried again the next night. And the next. She wasn't singing for comfort. She was singing for permission. Permission to be somebody's child. Permission to come home to a name that had waited 23 years for her to claim it. The DNA results came back on the 6th day. The nurse handed her the envelope with a look that already told her the answer. Amara opened it slowly. She read it twice, then a third time, even though her eyes were already flooding. 99.998%. It wasn't a surprise, but it still knocked the breath out of her. She placed the envelope down beside her mother's bed. Then she took her hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. The words came out shaking. I should have believed you. I should have known. But no one ever looked at me like you did. No one ever called me anything that felt like it fit. She sniffed, wiped her nose with the sleeve of her gown. I didn't know how to be anybody's daughter. Her head dropped. I didn't know how to be yours. That night, she lay her head gently beside Darlene's hand, her cheek against the pillow. The machines kept their rhythm. Her breathing slowed. She whispered again, "Come back to me, Mama. Please. Just once." And in the silence that followed, something shifted. A twitch. Barely there, but real. Darlene's index finger moved. Only once. But enough. Amara's eyes flew open. She sat up straight, staring at her mother's hand. The monitor still beeped. The breathing still came from the machine. But the hand, it had moved. She reached for it. Mom. Nothing. No more movement. But her heart was racing now. She pressed the call button with shaking fingers. A nurse rushed in. Checked the monitors. Checked Darlene's eyes. She's still unresponsive, the nurse said. It could have been a reflex. But Amara didn't believe that. She held her mother's hand tighter. She heard me. And for the first time in her life, she said it without flinching. She's my mom. Time became a loop. Every morning, Amara boarded the same bus, sat in the same seat, passed the same buildings. The driver stopped asking her destination. She didn't need to say room 203 anymore. The hospital knew her now. She was the girl who came every day, without fail, to sit beside the woman in the coma. Darlene had been unconscious for 13 days. 13 long, quiet, sacred days. Amara stayed as long as the nurses would let her. From early morning until after the last rounds. Some nights, they gave her an extra blanket and let her sleep upright in the chair beside her mother's bed. Other nights, she curled up in the waiting room with her head pressed against the wall, just close enough to hear the monitor through the glass. It wasn't duty that kept her coming. It was something deeper. It was the weight of a life she hadn't lived. A love that had been there all along, buried under the lies and missing papers and silent nights in foster homes where no one asked what she dreamed about. It was the knowledge that this woman, this fragile, fading woman, had given her blood just to give her another day. Amara owed her more than that. She brought pieces of herself each day. A cracked iPod with gospel songs. A beat-up notebook filled with quotes. Cheap flowers from a gas station wrapped in tissue. A worn Bible that had been through too many moves. She played Mahalia Jackson and read aloud from Proverbs. She told stories from her life, slowly, awkwardly, like unwrapping a gift she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. She told Darlene about the first time she learned to cook, about the time she got sick in 5th grade and no one noticed until her teacher called an ambulance, about the way she used to stare at other families in grocery stores, trying to imagine what home felt like. She wasn't trying to impress her. She was trying to be known. Sometimes she cried while talking. Other times she laughed, even when Darlene didn't move. She laughed for both of them. She didn't want her mother's last memory to be sterile silence. But it was hard. Hard to sit in that room day after day and wonder if the moment had already come and gone. If Darlene had used her last breath in that whisper, Amara, and all that remained was a body with no soul left inside. The doctors didn't give her much hope. She's stable, they said, which didn't feel like a blessing. But if she doesn't regain consciousness soon, they never finished the sentence. They didn't need to. Amara heard it in the way they paused. In the way the nurses changed her 4 bags gently, like the body they were treating wasn't coming back. She didn't argue. She didn't get angry. She just stayed. Every single day. And then came the 14th. Amara hadn't slept much the night before. Her shoulder ached from the chair. Her stomach turned when she tried to eat. The locket felt heavier than usual. She was humming again, soft, quiet, off-key. His eye is on the sparrow. The same song she remembered from her dreams. The same one Darlene once swore she used to hum while pregnant. Amara didn't know if it was real, but she didn't care anymore. Real didn't always mean proof. She finished the first verse, then leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her voice cracked when she started the second. Too many emotions. Too little sleep. Her throat gave out midline. She slumped in the chair and let her eyes close. Just for a second. Then something changed. The breathing machine made a sound she hadn't heard before. Not a warning. Not a drop. A shift. A difference in rhythm. Amara sat up, heart pounding. Darlene's eyes were open. Wide. Not rolling. Not flickering. Open. Focused. Mama, she whispered, stumbling forward. Darlene blinked. Then her lips moved. Amara. Her voice was dry and cracked, barely above a whisper. But Amara heard it. She dropped to her knees beside the bed, clutching her mother's hand like it was the last solid thing in the world. I'm here, she sobbed. I'm here, Mama. I'm right here. Darlene's fingers trembled as they lifted, brushing the side of Amara's cheek. I knew, she whispered. I knew you'd come. Amara broke. Tears spilled freely. She kissed her mother's knuckles, pressed her forehead to the mattress, shook with the weight of everything she hadn't let herself feel until now. I'm sorry, she choked. I should have believed you sooner. I should have known. But I didn't. I was scared. I thought you were just... No, Darlene rasped. Don't say sorry. You're here. That's all I ever wanted. Amara sat up slowly, wiping her eyes. I got the test. DNA. It's real. You were right. You were always right. Darlene smiled, faint but sure. Of course I was. A mother knows. They stayed that way for hours. Talking, laughing softly, crying without shame. Amara braided her mother's hair like she used to do with the residents at Golden Pines. Darlene closed her eyes, breathing steady but shallow, letting her daughter's fingers move gently through the silver strands. They talked about the night Amara was born. They told me you didn't make it, Darlene said. Said your lungs failed. But I saw you. They let me touch your hand for 1 second. I saw your mark. Right here. She reached and tapped the spot under Amara's right thumb. I carved your name on that necklace. Scratched it with a needle until it bled into the metal. I never took it off, Amara whispered, even when I didn't know why. They talked about what came next. I want to take care of you, Amara said. I'll figure out a way. Quit the nursing home. Maybe move us somewhere quieter. You don't have to give up your life for me. You gave up yours. More than once. I'd do it again. I know. The night wore on. By 2 a.m., Darlene was getting tired again. Her eyes started to close. Amara tucked the blanket tighter around her, brushing the hair from her forehead. I'm not leaving, she whispered. Darlene smiled. Sing for me. Amara hesitated, then nodded. She took a deep breath and started. Why should I feel discouraged? Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. Why should the shadows come? Darlene's chest rose and fell steady. Come. His eyes on the sparrow. And I know. She looked down at her mother's face. Still. Peaceful. Alive. And I know. He watches me. Amara reached for her hand again. Held it gently. I love you, Mama. Darlene didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because for the first time in her life, Amara knew what it meant to be loved back. Morning arrived like it always did, soft, slow, indifferent to what it found. Golden light spilled into room 203, warming the walls and crawling gently across the foot of the bed. The machines still hummed, steady and mechanical, as if daring the silence to challenge them. Amara was already awake. She hadn't slept much. The hospital chair had become her home over the past 2 weeks, and her body had grown used to its stubborn angles. She didn't mind anymore. All that mattered was that Darlene had made it through another night. She sat close, one hand resting on her mother's, the other curled protectively over the locket that had never left her neck. Not once. Not since Darlene had confirmed what Amara had never been able to explain, that this simple silver charm had been carved with love, in fear, during the briefest 2 seconds of togetherness, that had survived what neither of them should have. That morning, Darlene had been resting peacefully. Her breathing was softer than usual, not ragged, not labored, just calm. Amara watched her for a long time before finally standing, her knees cracking from hours in place. She leaned down, kissed her mother's forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back in a few. Just coffee. Don't go anywhere." She meant it as a joke. Darlene had made it a habit to sleep most of the day, waking only to drink water or smile faintly at the sound of Amara humming. Their nights had been filled with quiet conversation, low laughter, stories told and retold like bedtime prayers. It had become a rhythm, a gentle, healing rhythm. She left the room with light feet. The hallway outside was quiet. The air carried that faint, sterile chill found only in hospitals, clean, sad, and permanent. She bought a black coffee from the machine in the lobby and added too much sugar. Then she sat in the small window, nook across from the chapel, and took 3 slow sips, staring out at the traffic below. She didn't linger long. Something in her chest felt uneasy. Not panic, not dread, just a whisper. When she returned, the door to room 203 was already open. She stopped cold when she saw the nurse standing beside the bed, frozen, eyes wide. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor had vanished. In its place was a flat, continuous tone, sharp, unwavering, merciless. The nurse turned toward her just as Amara dropped the coffee. She was just asleep, the woman said, her voice cracking. I checked her pulse and the next minute moved like water in a dream. More nurses rushed in. A crash cart, a defibrillator, someone calling out, "Code Blue, room 203. The bed surrounded by movement and urgency and noise. Hands on her mother's chest. Barked instructions. Medication syringes. Amara didn't move. She stood just inside the doorway, watching her mother's body jerk beneath each compression. The same body that had carried her, held her for seconds, bled for her. The same hands that had stroked her hair in the darkness and pressed weakly into hers while whispering, "I knew you'd come back to me." She knew this was the end before anyone said the words. The room emptied slowly once the effort stopped. A doctor placed a hand on her shoulder, said something kind and clinical. "Time of death, 7:42 a.m., but the words didn't land. Only the silence did. The deep, final kind. The kind that strips everything bare. Amara moved toward the bed with careful steps. Darlene looked peaceful. Her features, softened by stillness, no longer showed strain or illness or fear. Her fingers were slightly curled, and her skin was still warm. Amara sat beside her and took her hand one last time. She stayed there for hours. No one rushed her. No one tried to move her. She didn't weep at first. She didn't speak. She simply sat and held the hand that had never stopped reaching for her, even across 2 decades of absence. She didn't let go until her fingers began to ache. The funeral came 5 days later. It was small, quiet, uncomplicated, just as Darlene would have wanted. A few staff from Golden Pines attended. Miss Tanya brought a bouquet of fresh irises and left them on the casket. One of the nurses from St. Mark's read Psalm 23 aloud. No choir. No slideshow, just a small church, a simple gray casket, and a daughter who never thought she'd get the chance to say goodbye. Before the service began, Amara stood beside the casket alone. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter, 2 pages, handwritten in neat, careful lines. She had written it the night before, not for show, not to be read aloud, just something she needed her mother to have. She slipped it into the space between Darlene's fingers. A letter filled with everything she didn't have time to say. Memories, regrets, thank yous. The first time she called her mama on paper. But the locket? She kept that. She reached up, touched it where it rested against her heart, and gently pressed it beneath her blouse. That locket had survived too much. It had been with her when she had no name. It had been the one thing Darlene left behind for her, proof that she had once been held, once been loved. That piece of silver was no longer just a mystery. It was legacy. She would never part with it again. In the weeks that followed, the world changed slowly around her. Amara didn't return to Golden Pines. Not because she couldn't, but because she needed something different now. She applied to a nursing program that offered evening classes, a bridge course she'd always told herself she didn't deserve. She moved into a small apartment across from the river, with wide windows and yellow walls that caught the light just right. She painted them herself. It was the first home she had ever chosen. She changed her name legally, Amara Holloway. She signed the paperwork with shaking hands, not because she was afraid, but because it felt like something sacred was being sealed. She was no longer a girl searching for a history. She was the result of one. Most nights, she sat by the window and lit a small candle. Sometimes she played old gospel records on a thrifted player. Sometimes she just listened to the city breathing. Every night before bed, she touched the locket once. And every night, she whispered, "Good night, Mama." Not because she was still grieving, but because she finally had someone to miss.